I'm Nate the Bias User, and right now I'm going to be reviewing the new Richard Dawson album, The Ruby Chord, which isn't my introduction to Richard Dawson's career, but is an introduction for me to his solo work. And what more surprising way can you introduce someone to not just your work but other people to one of your albums than to start the album off with one track that's the length of your average record, with it being 41 minutes taking up half of this entire record, when adding up the other half makes an almost hour-and-a-half experience. The 41-minute introduction, The Hermit, takes a lot of time to get to the chase. Outside the violin, the beginning mostly shows softness of feathery drums and low string play, and the song doesn't get Richard's mythologically sounding singing until at least 10 minutes into the song, which is nothing bad in the first 10 minutes at all, because of the amount of detail shown on the low instrumentation. But I can't say I can recommend this to an impatient listener. Also, I found it alarming that this track felt just as long as it was, if not longer. But thankfully it wasn't a huge issue, since this song was pretty much enjoyable from front to back. And there's so much potential shown and met when Richard's singing came into play. There were even moments to this track where it was just Richard, singing over silence with vocals going from deep to high, and it was repetition I couldn't ask to stop. But when it did the first time, I was greeted by a beautiful heavy harp. And on the second time, I got a completely different instrumental that threw me off, but once I got used to what I was hearing, like the peaceful group singing and violins backing it up, I grew to appreciate it, even with there still being the cost of focus. When leaving the massive intro, we get 6 more tracks, and even when all except one are still relatively lengthy, they feel lighter in length than most tracks when coming from a song as long as The Hermit. And the track to start off the final half, Thicker Than Water, was quality and beautiful enough for me to believe Richard wasn't going to treat the shorter cuts like leftovers. But to my complaints, we do get The Fool, whose instrumental clutter sounds like a junkyard if everything in said junkyard was used for music. There were noises here that literally sounded like farts. And even if there were some potential beauty around this cut, it's guaranteed to get distracted. I wouldn't say this track is Richard not trying, but it is Richard being unlistenable. But then we get Museum, whose beauty from the harp and acoustic gets more instigated than distracted, with the static sound that's low and backs the strings up good, and the track's adventurous and enthusiastic direction that progresses into what feels like a wormhole of intense sound. And I love how the intense progression gets welcomed by group humming from what I think is a student choir. There's so much to love about Museum, and so much of it. After this, there's the 10-minute The Tip of an Arrow, which I really wanted to like more, just because of the moments of guitars punching with intensity that were catchy, but on the same track, we get soft and slow instrumentation with acoustics that are doing its job, but not giving out any standout riffs. These spots pale far in comparison to the best of this track, and I swear if I got one more track I wasn't crazy about, I wouldn't help but see this album as a mixed bag, tracklist-wise. But there wasn't anything for me to hate after this, thankfully. Horse and Rider was some beautiful sway your body side to side campfire music with catchy vocals and a progressive atmosphere. The spacey group vocals at the end were touching my soul, and I didn't want it to stop. While the weaker moments of the Ruby Chord are still very visible, it's visible on an hour and 20-minute long project I came out of liking the vast majority of, and remembering why I love Richard Dawson's singing and arrangement so much. I'm going to give this album a 7.6.